Last week's episode was jam-packed with so many clinical pearls and nutrition tips for athletes, so I had to bring Amy back to go deeper into some hot topics in the sports world. So today we'll be discussing sports drinks and whether we should be concerned about the amount of sugar in them, whether kids need energy drinks, how to reframe an athlete's understanding about eating enough, and strategies to help underweight kiddos gain weight healthfully. We're going to close out our conversation with an important reminder that body weight should never be the focus of our interventions. Often children just need to make some simple shifts to see drastic changes in their body composition and performance. I'm Colleen Sloan, a registered dietitian, PA, and your nutrition mentor. Welcome to the Exam Room Nutrition Podcast, your guide to giving better nutrition advice. Now, this is part 2 of my conversation with Amy. So if you missed the first part, go back to last week's episode and take a listen after you finish this one. Now, feel free to grab the link to this episode and share it with a colleague or friend. Fueling our teen athletes is so important, and I need your help getting this message out to people who need it the most. Now, the experience Amy shares with us stems from her 19-year career as a sports dietitian. Check out this list of teams she's worked with: the Dallas Cowboys, Texas Rangers, TCU Athletics, Ben Hogan Sports Medicine, FC Dallas Soccer, the NBA G League, the Alliance of American Football League, many PGA Tour players, as well as thousands of middle school, high school, and endurance athletes. As if that wasn't enough, she's also the creator of a free sports nutrition program for high schools called the Sports Nutrition Game Plan, and is the owner of the Sports Nutrition Playbook, a business providing sports nutrition services for athletes. She also hosts a podcast called the Sports Nutrition Playbook, and I will link to all of her resources down below in the show notes. Are you as excited as I am to listen in on our conversation about sports nutrition? All right, let's get to it. Amy, thank you so much for coming back on. Last week's topic was such a huge hit. I learned so much from you, and my listeners are loving it. So thank you so much for being here and for the gift of your time. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I love hot topics in sports nutrition because lots of athletes are confused and they believe a lot of myths. So time to debunk the myth and give some fact.
Let's do it. So the first topic I want to talk about is just the fad diets and dieting in general for athletes. What would you recommend that a clinician say to a patient if they have a question about a fad diet or maybe even just a trend that they saw on social media?
One of the most important things you can always educate an athlete about is that their body is what's going to give them the energy that they need to play their favorite sport, do their favorite thing. And so we want them to be well fueled. And I like to remind athletes that just because you look good doesn't mean you can perform well. I can watch a Victoria's Secret model show. I don't think any of them could go run 1 mile after that modeling show. So, what is your goal? Is your goal to be a standout, well-fueled athlete? Or do you want to look a certain way? Those are not the same thing. And if you want to perform at the highest level, you have to fuel your body at the highest level. And that means giving it the appropriate nutrition so that you are able to do what you're asking your body to do. So fueling it with carbohydrates, proteins, healthy fats, fruits and vegetables. And really, a lot of it's the reframing. Athletes think in the world of performance success. They're pretty driven like that. So thinking through and even asking some questions as a clinician. Well, why do you like playing your sport? Well, I love being out there and playing. Like, what's your goal? Well, I want to be able to be the fastest on the team. Well, how do you think you can be the fastest on the team? Well, I'm going to train hard. Right. But you also need to make sure you're fueling it well. So sometimes asking some questions, coaching them into their own answer can be helpful when you're educating athletes about staying away from diets and focusing on fueling. A lot of times it's just a reframe and looking at it through a performance lens.
That's a really helpful tip to show the athlete that nutrition is important. So the last conversation we ended with talking about hydration. A big focus was on water, but you also mentioned other sources of fluids can count to their total fluid intake, including milk and sports drinks. So I want to linger here with sports drinks because a lot of parents will come to me and say that they're concerned because those sports drinks have too much sugar. Yeah. And so can you touch on that concern with giving their child a sports drink?
Yes, I said this last week. I'll say it again. Nutrition and sports nutrition are not the same thing. And when you put a greater demand on your body, you put a greater demand on your fueling needs. So lots of parents get wrapped up about the sugar and salt in sports drinks because in the nutrition world, we say, cut your sugar, cut your salt. But in the athlete world, sugar and salt are your best friends. So we need athletes to consume carbohydrate and salt to help fuel their bodies. Here is what I like parents to remember. When we talk about an athlete, let's say they start a practice or a game well fueled, but while they're out there running, they are burning off energy and sweating out salt. So when I add sugar and salt via a sports drink, I'm not just adding sugar and salt to their day. I'm replacing what's being lost during that activity. And so that's really important to note for parents that sugar is going to be what fuels them to keep running, keep jumping, whatever they're doing. That salt is going to be what helps replace the electrolytes that are being sweated out. We also know that the average person loses 3 times the amount of sodium in their sweat as potassium. And if you have a really salty sweater as a kid, they might even lose more than that. The way you would know if you have a salty sweater is if your kid's clothes, hat, or shoes have white on it, like white, almost like chalk or like looking like salt on that. That's a sign that they're a salty sweater and probably need even more electrolytes. So my kind of like rule of thumb when I talk about sports drinks is they're a sports drink. Drink while playing sport. They're not a math drink, a video drink, or a hangout drink. They're a sports drink. So if you use the product appropriately, it serves a good purpose. Don't get mad at the product because you're using it inappropriately.
Do you have a rule of thumb when it comes to when and who we should recommend a sports drink, especially considering electrolyte replacement?
So when it comes to drinking sports drinks, typically we say you can hang out with water or an electrolyte rich water for the first 60 to 90 minutes of activity. After about 90 minutes, we need you to start consuming carbohydrate and sodium if you're going to continue on. Now, that does not mean you have to wait until the 90-minute marker, especially if you know you're going to be out there for 3 hours. If you know you're going to be working out for multiple hours, my rule is always drink early, drink often, and start refueling early before you're too far behind. And so trying to make sure that you're staying on top of that hydration is key. A few places where you might incorporate a sports drink earlier is if you train in the morning and you really haven't eaten or drinking that much since last night, a sports drink could help give you some added carbohydrate and sodium. If it's hot and humid outside, we know that heat can really enhance sweating by about 10 to 20%. So if you're sweating 10 to 20% more, you're putting a greater demand on your body. So important that you might start incorporating a sports drink earlier in your workout. If you're training twice a day, young athletes training twice a day, whether that's 2 days, whether that's a school sport, then a club sport, or a school sport, and then some type of individual practice, you're putting a high demand on your body, and it's going to be difficult for your athletes to stay well fueled, well hydrated. So incorporating a sports drink is just going to help give them a little bit extra. The electrolytes and the carbohydrate are key. And we have to make sure we're allowing athletes to get those in when they are performing and practicing, because it's really going to be helping them, again, replace what was lost, not necessarily just adding sugar and salt to their body.
Now, with that being said, should all athletes have the mixture of a carbohydrate with electrolytes or just electrolytes? Because I've seen both. I know there's some brands that are really heavy on the electrolytes and they don't have many carbs and vice versa. So what's your opinion on that?
So kind of depends on when you're drinking them. So I actually just had a parent ask me this yesterday at a cross country. He was like, regular Gatorade or Gatorade with no sugar? I was like, well, when are you drinking it? If your kid is going to a practice, then we want full sugar, full electrolytes, because that's going to be what helps fuel them. There are a variety of sports drinks, the Gatorades, the Powerades, lots of different brands that make lower sugar versions of them. And most of the time, if you really dive in, they're more marketed as an off the court, off the course, off the field drink. So I'll use Gatorade. It's one of the easiest ones for me to know. So there's a G2 and a G-Fit. G2 and G-Fit have the same electrolytes as regular Gatorade. The sugar is less, because if I'm sitting there in math class or watching a movie with my friends, I might need the electrolytes because I've been sweating a lot throughout the day. I may not need the added sugar in that moment. So a lot of times when you're looking and evaluating a sports drink, you need to look at when are you drinking it. If it's around a sport, drink the regular. If it's a time throughout the day where you're just wanting hydration and electrolytes, then maybe you're looking at the lower calorie or low sugar version. In regards to electrolytes, for athletes, I mean, my rule of thumb is sodium and potassium do not hurt them ever. Most youth athletes are training 2 to 4 hours a day minimally, and they need those electrolytes. So putting them in their water, whether it's adding flavor to their water, little tablets that dissolve, there's electrolyte rich waters out there that you can purchase. I had a young runner ask me yesterday, she was like, well, which one do I do? And I'm like, you know what? It's really which one you like the flavor of. There's not just one great, like, this is the perfect one, because everyone's different. If you're an excessive sweater, you might need something like Liquid IV or the right stuff that's really high in sodium. If you just sometimes experience cramping when you're, in your second hour of training, you might do good with a Pedialyte or a Gator Lights or something like that. So there's a variety of things on the market. Like I'll tell parents, it's like screwdrivers. There's a variety of screwdrivers. They're used for all different things. They provide the same purpose, but you might use a specific one for a specific need. Same concept with electrolytes. There's a lot of electrolyte beverages and things that you can add to beverages that, you can add to water. So you just have to kind of figure out what works for you.
I love the analogies you use. It's so simple and it sticks. All right. So we're going to stick with drinks because this is just such a big topic and parents and patients are so confused with this. So let's move towards energy drinks and pre-workouts. I'm going to kind of lump them together, but I would love to hear what you think about that for our young athletes, if we should be recommending it, what the safety issues are, and just kind of give us some education on pre-workout and energy drinks as a whole.
So energy drinks are what they are, right? They're typically a source of caffeine. Many of them are also going to be a source of sugar. So let's start with, if you don't know as a practitioner, the American Academy of Pediatrics rules on caffeine for teens and adolescents. So for teens age 12 to 18, it's 100 milligrams or less a day. If you're 12 and under, it's none, zero. And so one of my biggest challenges with young athletes drinking energy drinks and or pre-workouts that have a lot of caffeine in them is that it's a lot of caffeine. And they might be going to their favorite coffee shop and doing this, and then they're drinking soda or they're drinking tea. And so they're getting a lot of sources of caffeine throughout the day. One of my favorite questions to ask young athletes is, why do you need this much caffeine for energy? Because as a young athlete, you should probably have, especially boys. I'm like, y'all are producing more testosterone than anyone ever. You should have more energy than anyone on the planet. So if you feel like you need energy, what are you doing wrong? You must not be sleeping enough or eating enough, because adequate sleep and adequate fuel should give kids, when I say kids, I mean athletes under 18 and under, the amount of energy that they need. My biggest challenge, especially with pre-workouts and or energy drinks, is that many of them are using them as a replacement instead of a supplement for something. So they're using them as a replacement for not sleeping enough, a replacement for, I need a pre-workout. And I'm like, well, what'd you eat for breakfast, or a snack before you came to work out? Nothing. I'm like, well, perhaps a bagel could have done the same thing for you. Another challenge is that many of these energy drinks and some pre-workouts have additional ingredients that are central nervous stimulants and may not be listed as straight caffeine. So you could have a lot of things stimulating the central nervous system. And the risk there is that, do you cause an athlete's heart rate to beat too fast, and to have some of those issues, especially on a game or a competition day? This is a huge risk, because on a game and a competition day, you have one thing going that you don't have any other day, and it's called adrenaline. And unless you find a bear running behind you, you cannot mimic adrenaline and what it does to the body. Adrenaline pulls sugar out of the blood faster, which can lead to lower blood sugar, and it speeds up your central nervous system. So if I have adrenaline doing that and I have a kid drinking an energy drink before a game, well, I have two things doing the same thing now where it doesn't look like that. So you'll see athletes get dizzy, get lightheaded. We've seen in the past year, a few athletes, young, professional, and in college, hit the ground in a game. And I just kind of wonder, wonder what you ate before this. How many energy drinks were involved in your day today, And so we really have to look at the risk of what excessive caffeine can do to someone, especially a young athlete. So I've talked to a lot of mental health professionals in the sports world, and they say for young athletes, it's actually a really negative cycle to get into, in that they get a high of energy. And when they come off of that high, they feel like they need another high. And as you think about educating parents, like high, low is a real bad situation to get kids into, because they'll start relying on other things in that as well. And for parents out there, I would ask you to ask your kid and look at them and say, what are we doing wrong that's making you need this much caffeine?
Such a great answer. And I love that you focus on food first, because that is going to be the best fuel for a young athlete and us seasoned athletes as well,
Yes.
too. If we're not eating enough carbohydrates are the best source of fuel. Of course, we're going to feel sluggish. And then they're going to want to lean towards an energy drink or
Right.
a pre-workout. So I love that you mentioned that, because oftentimes you don't need to waste your money on a pre-workout or on an energy drink. You can just have, like you said, a simple bagel, and that will do the trick.
It just kills me. I'm like, and they're like, well, I'm so tired. I'm like, well, you didn't drink any fluid before you came. So that's good. And you didn't eat anything. So dehydration can make you feel tired too. And then you didn't sleep enough. So I'm like, I feel like there's a variety of things that we could fix before you go purchase an energy drink like I said, people are using it as a replacement. And we need to start looking at, what are you trying to replace?
It's such a good point. And people forget that supplements are a supplement. They are not intended to be your sole source of nutrition. So I think that's a really good thing that you mentioned. And I love that you had mentioned the limitation on caffeine for young people, because a lot of people don't really know that there is that limitation. I actually just did an episode. It's episode 65. If you guys want to go check that out, it's called Does Coffee Stunt My Growth? But I really dive deep into the safety limitations of caffeine for kids, because 100 milligrams is really only about a cup of coffee a day. It's not a lot. So if they're having a coffee from Starbucks and also an energy drink twice a day, they're way above the minimum recommendations. So that's a really important piece of education that clinicians need to be discussing with their patients for sure. So I want to move into the weight conversation, and I want to talk about the two, ends of the spectrum. So I'd love to start with our kiddos who need to gain weight, and they're an athlete. So they're burning a lot of calories, but maybe they're underweight or they're just looking to meet their weight goals. What are some strategies that we can do to help them gain weight healthfully?
So it's important to remember that as a young athlete, you need nutrition for growth and development. You need nutrition for hormone production. You need nutrition for all of the sports that you are playing, all of the activity you're doing with your friends after that. And so young athletes need a lot of nutrition. And many times it's hard for them to get the right amount. And then moms and dads get confused because mom's trying to eat, grilled chicken, broccoli, and skim milk. And then the kid needs to gain 20 pounds. I don't care how much grilled chicken, broccoli, and skim milk your kid eats. Like, there's no way ever, ever, ever. Here are a few strategies and solutions that are actually very simple that you can educate your patients and your parents about for kids that need to gain weight. Number one, they need to eat often. I'm not as wrapped up in is it breakfast, lunch, and dinner, They need to eat often, starting with breakfast. Breakfast, break the fast. A kid that tells me, I want to gain weight, and I say, what do you eat for breakfast? And they say, no breakfast. I say, then you don't want to gain weight. So eating from the second you wake up, and eating is really consuming nutrition, could be via food or fluid. So eating often, consistently throughout the day, trying to give their body the energy that it needs to work off of. So the example I always use is like, if you were going to go on a road trip and you just took off and started driving, well, you have gas in your tank, but it's getting lower and lower and lower. On the reverse side, if you stopped in every other town and put gas in it, you'd always be working off of what you just put in your gas tank. That's what I'm trying to do with the body, because I'm technically trying to overfeed it if they're trying to gain weight. So if I can consistently fuel, that's going to be really important. So number one, consistent fueling. Number two, making high calorie food exchanges. So a lot of athletes think eat more food, and I'm going to say get more into what you're already eating. So instead of eating toast for breakfast or your sandwich on plain bread, let's eat it on a bagel. Instead of eating Cheez-Its all day, let's eat trail mix. Instead of drinking water at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, let's drink chocolate milk. Instead of, eating Apple Jacks for breakfast, let's say eat granola. Instead of doing like just plain steamed vegetables, let's saute them with olive oil and put some cheese on top of them. So it's making some different high calorie food exchanges. I'm adding nutrient rich calories. Nothing I said was crazy, but I'm adding those good calories to help them get in more calories per bite. Third thing would be using healthy fats as a way to get more nutrition in. So that yields more calories per gram or per bite than I like to tell people. So carbohydrate and protein yield 4 calories a gram, fat yields 9 calories a gram. So trying to incorporate some of those healthy fats like peanut butter, nuts, seeds, trail mix, avocados on burgers and sandwiches and wraps can be really great ways to help athletes get in more nutrition. I tell athletes, think of like a sandwich baggie on Sunday, make 7 of those full of trail mix. Basic old off-brand trail mix, or make your own. A sandwich baggie of trail mix is about 1,000 calories. So if you were to snack on that throughout the day, I'm like, eat it all at once, eat it throughout the day, but eat that in addition to what you eat. I could add 7,000 calories to your week pretty easily. And, I always tease people like trail mix tastes good and it's really easy to overeat. So great. It's a perfect snack for athletes and it's shelf stable. So it can go in a backpack. It can go in a gym bag. It can go in a locker. Very easy ways to get that in. And then using your fluid, we've talked a lot about, as a source to get in more nutrition. So instead of just having kids drink water, let's drink milk and chocolate milk and smoothies that are made with high quality protein and fruit. One of my favorites, and parents would laugh at me, but like the Boost and Ensure Pluses that we give old people, they're designed to be meal replacements. Those are super easy solutions. They're like in indestructible containers. They can throw them in their backpack. They're lactose free by trade. So usually it's okay if they're not totally really cold. Ensure makes one called Ensure Complete, 350 calories, 30 grams of protein. Like an athlete can wash a meal down with one of those. So looking for ways to get more fuel with fluid.
We'll get back to the episode in just a second, but I've got something I think you're going to love. It's my free guide called The 4 Ps to Picking a Protein Supplement. Now, raise your hand if you've ever been in the supplement aisle, totally overwhelmed by all the protein options, not really sure what you're looking at on the label. Now, I get it. It can be confusing. But don't worry, my friend. I've made it super simple with an easy to follow infographic that'll help you pick the best protein supplement for you or your patient. Just head to examroomnutrition.com/protein to grab your free copy. It's my gift to you for tuning in. All right, now back to the episode.
So I'll recap that. Eating often, consistently throughout the day, making high calorie food exchanges, trying to get more calories in for the bites that you're eating, focusing on getting more healthy fats with things like nut butters, nut seeds, and trail mix, and then trying to use fluid as fuel. Most athletes will tell me they don't need to be hungry to drink something. I know personally, I could drink chocolate milk about any time of day, and it's a great way to add protein, calcium, vitamin D, added nutrients for them, in addition to calories and hydration. So those are some of the best easy tips.
Amy, you are just giving us a master class in sports nutrition. I hope you guys are taking notes because this is some powerful, really, really helpful stuff. The 1,000 calories of a bag of trail mix is brilliant. That right there is probably the best tip that you can give a parent who's like asking you, oh, I need to help my child gain weight. What do I do? And you have a minute left in your checkup. Boom, right there. Make a baggie of trail mix, eat one every day, and go see a dietitian, right? This is so, so helpful. So I want to linger here a little bit on the patients who need to gain weight. But let's focus on our picky eaters. Now, not all picky eaters are underweight, but often they are because they're so limited in the foods that they would like to eat. So I would love some tips. And of course, I talk about picky eating a lot on this podcast, and being in pediatrics, it's my favorite thing to talk about. But I would love to hear some strategies specifically for our athletic picky eaters and what we can do to help them.
So I did a podcast on this myself because it's such a hot topic, like kids that don't like to eat whatever it is. So first, I would say let's look at the foods they do like. So if they like milk or chocolate milk or peanut butter, whatever that is, trying to incorporate more of those nutrient rich foods in where you can. The other thing I like to remind parents is that if you give a kid a bowl of broccoli and you just keep giving them a bowl of broccoli, they're probably not going to like your bowl of broccoli. So one of my biggest tips is to learn how to like foods with foods you already like. So for example, if your kid really won't eat spinach or tomatoes or something like that, but they will 100% eat an egg, ham, and cheese omelet. Maybe you start with like a little bit of spinach in there, a little bit of tomatoes, and learn to acquire the flavor of that. Say your kid won't eat broccoli, but they love rice and they love cheese. Let's start with cheesy rice. Now let's add cheesy rice with a few bites of broccoli in there, gradually increasing the amount of broccoli. So really learning to help those kids eat foods that they don't like with foods they do like, or is often a way to acquire the flavor for it. So that's one way. I've heard it too called bridging. So you're bridging them from, the foods that they love to the ones that they don't like by incorporating them and combining them together. So that's one way that you can think about doing that. Another way is to introduce foods different ways. So I mentioned about the broccoli. If you just keep giving your kid broccoli, they're probably not going to like it. Can you roast it? Can you saute it? Can you grill it? Can you put it with other things? So thinking of other unique ways to offer those foods can be really helpful for younger kids, specifically, making it fun. If it's on a skewer or if it's, something that they can do, that oftentimes will make it fun. So that's a helpful tip as well. And then getting your kids involved. So there's tons of research that supports when kids are involved in the food making decision and the food prepping decision, they're more likely to try it or eat it. There's a little bit of self-pride there, right? And so getting your athletes involved in the kitchen, and getting them involved, they're likely going to be a little, I would say, more willing possibly to try things because they had some input. They had some say in it. So getting them involved in the kitchen and just involved in the food decision process sometimes can be really, really important. And then I always take the route of the performance reframe in that, looking at it from a lens of performance. Well, what do you want to do as an athlete? Well, I want to get bigger. I want to get stronger. I want to get faster. Well, how do you think you do that? You need these fruits and vegetables and dairy and all the different things for fuel to help your body recover and all the different things. Getting young athletes to eat vegetables is often a really large challenge. So this is the way I always tell it to them. I'm like, think of the behind the scenes team of a big sporting event or your favorite concert. You don't always see the behind the scenes team there. But if they weren't there, bad things would happen. The whole show would go down. Fruits and vegetables, the vitamins and minerals and antioxidants they provide are the behind the scenes team in your body. You may not see what they're doing, but they're after you finish a practice, helping with recovery, helping you rebuild all of the different things. And so if you want to be an elite athlete that performs at the highest level, you've got to put the right fuel in your body. So a lot of it, again, is just that reframe of performance and helping them see, and then using some of the strategies of acquiring flavors of food, trying new things, offering it different, and then getting them involved in the food decision and food making process.
That is music to my ears. I talk every day about the importance of getting kids involved in the kitchen and in serving the food even too. I mean, my daughter is not picky at all, but I'm trying to equip her, to be a thriving adult. So we are having some cooking classes at home with mom, and she took so much pride in this one peanut Asian pasta dish that she made. She doesn't like peanuts, but she was so proud of the dish that she made. She actually ate it and she's like, oh, it's actually not that bad. So it's really amazing. Like you had said, you're really, really proud of something that you put out or contributed to, that you might actually try it and you might like it. So I always remind parents, get your kids in the kitchen as often as you can. Sometimes it's not realistic because you're super busy, but once a month, once a week even, it would be great. Now I want to swing to the other side and talk about our kiddos who might need to lose weight. So I'm really curious as to how you navigate that with sensitivity, because we do not ever want to body shame anyone. And I speak constantly about this on the podcast and to my parents that we should never, ever, ever shame a child or make them feel uncomfortable for the body that they're in. However, in the cases that maybe they do need to lose weight for medical reasons or sports performance reasons, what are some healthy strategies that we can do to help them do that?
Yeah, it's a hard one, I will say, because parents, I feel like sometimes even get more wrapped up in it than the athlete does. Like my kid has this extra layer of body fat. So first of all, I would say to the parent, just general education is respect the age of puberty that your child is in. Hate to break it to you, but your little boys are going to have a little layer of body fat a lot of times until they are producing testosterone and go through puberty. It's very difficult for them to put on muscle mass at that age until they go through those tender stages of development. Like I'm like, they could eat you out of house and home. They won't put on the muscle mass. For girls, it's the opposite. They're often really lean and then they go through puberty and they'll start putting on body fat. It's a natural thing that happens. And parents oftentimes freak out because they're like, well, what's happening? Like, why can't my kid fill in the blank? So I think first we need to respect the stages of development. They're transitional stages. They will not stay there, but sometimes it takes a little bit of time for the body to adjust. When it comes to athletes that need to lose body fat, because I hear you, there's sports where that's necessary. If you're carrying a lot of extra body fat, you cannot jump as high. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of, rocket science to figure out. So for the majority of athletes is not cutting back on food, it's making swaps. So how can we start making nutrient rich swaps so that your kids might take in less, more nutrient rich calories without necessarily underfueling their bodies? So if they're eating, a croissant sandwich that's got bacon and cheese and egg on it in the morning, and you're like, not necessarily that it's bad foods, but if I gave that same breakfast sandwich with, a lean sausage and a slice of 2% cheese and eggs on a whole grain English muffin, still gave the same thing, but I gave a lot more nutrients, more fiber, more protein, probably going to help them feel more satisfied for less calories. So many times it's, when you're in the fast food line, I was coaching a young dietitian on this last night. The daughter's wrapped up, the athlete, in losing weight. And yet she's going and eating fried chicken sandwiches and French fries with her friends. And I'm like, well, what if we got a grilled chicken sandwich and a fruit cup? You can still go to the fast food restaurant. You can still go eat with your friends. Let's make some swaps. So I think one of the best things that you can do as a parent is look at where your kids might be getting auxiliary calories. Are they snacking on foods that don't keep them feel full? I mean, kids could eat probably 300 goldfish and never really feel full. Could I instead give them 2 string cheeses and 10 whole grain crackers? They'd probably feel a lot more satisfied. And so really trying to look at where you can make some swaps there is important. And then helping your kids fuel often. If kids themselves think they need to lose weight, they'll often start skipping meals. And that actually sets them up to be really hungry later. And when you're really hungry, you oftentimes, 2 things happen. You don't choose the best choices and you're more likely to overeat. So helping your kids understand that they need to fuel consistently, giving their body the energy that it needs. But a real key is eating when you're hungry, stopping when you're satisfied versus waiting till you're starving and eating till you're stuffed. So some basic things like that, you'd be surprised how fast that they can switch, eating more often, focusing on those nutrient rich swaps. And then we've talked about fluid a lot. Look at what your kids are drinking. There are many kids washing down a lot of calories with sodas and sweet teas. But let me tell you where they're also doing it. Starbucks fancy beverages and smoothies that they're buying that have 100 grams of sugar in it from the local shop. A 20-ounce thing of fresh pressed juice. I get its juice and nutrients, but it's still calories. And so a lot of kids take in a lot of sugar sweetened beverages that are adding lots of calories through their day, and they don't even really realize it. So those are, again, just some simple swaps where not only could we be tweaking their nutrition and promoting better nutrition, but hopefully going to help not even necessarily weight loss, because at that age, we're really looking oftentimes for more of body composition change. Can we help fuel their bodies to building muscle mass and then decrease some of that body fat? Like I said, you need to respect the age of your child's puberty level because sometimes it's really difficult to manage against that. But a lot of times it's their choices that they're eating throughout the day. And if we could swap those to more nutrient rich choices, they'd probably feel better, have more energy, be more satisfied, and actually be taking in less saturated fat and added sugar, which should equate to a better body composition over time.
I love that we're ending here because it's so easy as a clinician when a parent is like, oh, they need to lose weight. And you know what? Maybe they're off the charts for their, for their BMI or for their weight. And we affirm that as a clinician, that is actually quite detrimental to that patient for their mental health in the long term. And I love that you shifted the focus to body composition, because I think that is really where medicine and where nutrition and science is going. That is what we should be focusing on, is really how can we fuel their body to improve their lean muscle mass, but still giving them foods that they enjoy and still fueling them. Because like you had said, it's so often I see that the patient has been told, you need to lose weight, you need to lose weight. And what do? Eat less. But that does not optimize their performance at all. And so I love that you mentioned those simple swaps. And first and foremost, the first thing you should ask your patient is, what are you drinking throughout the day? Because like you said, holy moly, they are getting so many calories from sugars from the drinks that they're having. My daughter loves the Starbucks caramel ribbon frappuccino, and it is like way over 500, 600 calories and 60 grams of sugar in it. When she looked that up, she was like, oh my goodness, I had no idea. Now it's a treat and that's fine. But if they're drinking that every day, multiple times a day, and we are also trying to improve their body composition, it's a really simple place to start to improve that overall and improve their choices over time. So Amy, again, like I said, this was a masterclass in sports nutrition. I'm so grateful for what you had shared with us today. Please just share again with our listeners where they can find you and learn more about what you offer.
So my business is The Sports Nutrition Playbook. We have an Instagram, a podcast, and a YouTube channel, all under The Sports Nutrition Playbook. And our website is thesportsnutritionplaybook.com. So we'd love to connect with you. And then if you need further help, we have some on-demand programs. I have sports dietitians that see athletes one-on-one. And if you visit thesportsnutritionplaybook.com, you can find out how to access all of those resources.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to go ahead and link all of that down below in the show notes for you guys to access that later. Amy, thank you so much again for your time.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Well, I hope you enjoyed these episodes from Amy as much as I have. I've learned so much from her, and I really hope that you did too. So I wanted to share my thoughts for this week, and I actually am going to share a question for you that I want you to ponder after this episode ends. And this comes from James Clear's newsletter. So the question is, what conversation will you be proud of yourself for having, even if it doesn't end with the outcome you want? Now go have that conversation. All right, my friend. Well, I hope that was encouraging to you. And that is all I have for you today. So as always, let's continue to make our patients healthy, one exam room at a time. I'll see you next week.